Hey everyone, I'm back, and today I'm going to be talking about this book. I'm the Evil Lord of an Intergalactic Empire. Um, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. Um, it more or less starts off with our protagonist, Liam, in his first battle, his first actual real battle against some pirates in space. Again, this is about an intergalactic empire, so there's a lot of space involved in this novel. Um, he's up against these pirates and he's more or less beating them really easily. They pose no real threat to him, and during the battle, he more or less reminisces about how he got to this part. So we go back a bit before, you know, the whole thing about this novel was he was reincarnated into another world. Um, so he reminisces about how he got up to this, where fighting space pirates and whatnot. So it starts off with the next part, more or less going back before he reincarnated, how his life was before that. Um, he had a good life, but eventually a lot of things happened to him. He explained that he had a good job, he got married, he had a kid, he was doing pretty good for himself. But eventually, um, he kind of had a feeling something was going on with his wife because you know, she started acting a little different. So we get to a few things. Um, it kind of jumps a bit, and now he's like more or less on his deathbed. He's dying. He's sick. He's coughing up blood and whatnot. So he explains everything that happened up to this point. More or less, his wife ended up cheating on him with someone else. His boss framed him for a lot of fraud and whatnot that was going on in the company. Um, he ended up having so much debt and a lot of things. Collectors used to come after him. People used to threaten him for the money that the boss had owned, but they blamed it on him. A lot of his life went pretty much downhill. So now here he is thinking about what has he done. He's been pretty good his whole life, and now his wife won't let him see his kid, which we come to find out a little bit that the kid's not even his. The kid is that the guy who she cheated with. That's his kid, and she ends up talking to him and telling him that the kid is starting to really get attached to the new guy, so she doesn't want him around. So as this is going on, he's pretty much on his last legs. He's dying. So as he's dying, he says that this life was pretty bad, but he says something about how your pet is supposed to guide you into the next life or the next world or whatever, something like that. But before that could happen, he's visited by um someone known as the guide. Now we come to find out that the guide was the one who set up his life to be on the decline because he more or less feeds on all negative emotions and whatnot. So the guy comes to him. He tells him he's gonna, give him a second chance at life. He'll reincarnate him into a world of his choosing. So he gives him a choice. There's a whole bunch of different universes and worlds out there. So he tells him to pick one. Um, in doing so, in the novel, they actually have a little bit of an Easter egg kind of. One of the worlds that he could have reincarnated into was, in fact, the dating sim world. The way they explained the world was, it's a bunch of land masses floating in the air, which is pretty much the kind of world that dating sim is. But he chooses this one world where it's kind of futuristic. There's robots and stuff, and a whole intergalactic empire and whatnot. So he goes with that, and then the guide sends him off. After he passes away, the guide reincarnates him into that world. So when he does that, we find out everything that happened that caused his downfall was because of the guide. The guide says, I'm gonna make you fall into more despair, make me, feed me even more of your negative emotions by sending you to that world, making you think that, everything's going to be good. I'm gonna bring you up to knock you all the way back down, and then I'm gonna feed on that. So after he does that, he decides, okay, well, I don't need um, the wife and whatnot anymore. Let's mess them up now. So now he makes it so that the guy that was with the wife that she cheated with, he decides that, okay, um, I don't need you anymore. um, and then he goes on to say, why would I, you know, want to be with some a woman who easily threw her husband away? And he goes on, and she tries to, be like, well, don't go. What about your kid? And he's like, I don't care about all that. I don't want to be with you. I'm out. So we'll get back to them a little bit later, but more or less now he's messing up her life to feed on that. So after he sent him and reincarnated the main character Liam into the next world, before that happened, there was actually a small glint of light. That light being, remember when I said that he said something about his pet supposed to guide him into the next world, whatever? It, in fact, the his first pet, his dog, the spirit of it did come to guide him, but because of what the guide did, the dog ends up more or less following the guide around and kind of protecting him and helping him out throughout the story. So he gets reincarnated. Um, he's retains himself by the age of 5. He like more or less wakes up and realizes everything, and he has his memories. So the first thing that happens is his new parents more or less abandon him. His father's like, I've got a present for you. Why don't you sign here and here, and then I'll hand over all my territory and everything. You'll become the new lord. So he does that. He signs it, and then the mother's present to him was more or less an android, an AI named Amagi. Um, she had it built and gave it to him. So after this happens, the parents leave and they leave for the capital of the empire. As they're leaving, we find out that they did this because their house, the Banfields, are more or less in huge debt that they can't pay off. So it's been happening since Liam's parents era. More or less, they've been running it to the ground, the Banfield house, and there's no way to pay it back. So what they've been doing is handing off territory to their children and running away. They've done that for about 2 generations. So Liam becomes the master, and he has Amagi and a butler named Brian by his side. That's all he has. So immediately he's like, I'm still a kid, and I don't really understand a lot of what's going on. So there has to be some way. Being that this is a futuristic kind of empire, they have these capsules where you could more or less put yourself into and gain education. So he goes into a capsule for about 2 years, um, and he's able to learn a whole lot and pick up stuff. So what I forgot to mention about this new world was that their lifespan is very long. They're not considered an adult until they're at the age of 50, and their lifespans can go as high as 300 or more. So now here he is, from 5, now he's like 7 years old. Um, what he decides to do is that after everything that happened in his previous life, how he was a good person and whatnot, he's put it in his mind that he wants to be an evil lord. He doesn't want anybody to take advantage of him anymore. He wants to be the oppressor. So it's kind of funny how everything turned out, where he's he sees himself as being an evil lord, but in truth, the way his standards are set is set based on his previous life on Earth, where some of the things that he found, where he figured, if I'd be an evil lord if I do things this way. Whereas his territory was in such shambles that everything he does more or less benefits his territory. His people more or less see him as a great and wise ruler. Um, so he's building up to become an evil lord. What he's planning to do, his territory is so bad that he's like, I can't oppress my people any further than what they've oppressed right now. So I'm gonna build up this territory and then switch it up on them. But truthfully, in my opinion, I don't see that happening. He's kind of stupid. He he then sets out to start fixing everything in the territory. The debt that was incurred by his grandparents and his parents, he starts fixing that up, paying everything, getting everything fixed up in his territory. Um, he figures what he needs as an evil lord is wealth, violence, and women. Now he starts changing everything. What he does first is rearranging the army, getting rid of. I believe they had a fleet of like 30,000 ships. He downsized it down to like 1,000. He got rid of everything else, and that was what started helping him to start paying off the debt. He rearranged the mansion. He destroyed it because the mansion that they was living in, it was ugly. According to him, he didn't like it. He got rid of all his staff, and because the staff was useless. The staff that was there for his parents and whatnot, they were useless. They didn't want to work. They always went off and did whatever they wanted. So he got rid of them and hired some new people who actually did work. Um, yeah, he was rearranging everything in the territory. So now he's getting a little older, and he decides he wants to, learn like a martial art or something to gain power. So the guide has been watching over him, and he's like, I got the perfect person to teach him. More or less, he was gonna send somebody useless to him to teach him martial arts so that he could, end up being weak. All this time, the guide is, more or less scheming on how to, make his life miserable. So when the guy does that, we get to see how his old previous wife is doing now in her life. It's been a couple of years, and she's more or less struggling. It's just her and her daughter. Nothing's really going well for her anymore. She's at a low point herself. So all of that is feeding him, and he's like, okay, this is going great. I have this Liam reincarnated in the other world, and you know, I can't wait to more or less reap everything that I've set up. So again, the dog has been following the guide and more or less interfering in everything that goes on. So the guide, more or less, he has an ability where he can do whatever to anybody. It's like a black smoke, and he can more or less change things on how he wants it to go. So the guide sends for the instructor for Liam, and it ends up being this one useless guy who he's an older dude, but he had, according to Liam, the way he looks and whatnot, he looks like a master. He's really a novice. He only learned the basics of swordplay. So this guy, he figured, he'd come and scheme Liam out of his money, being a noble. They have some form of money. He'll just get paid, teach him whatever, and it'll go easy for him. So he gets there, and when he first arrives, um, Amagi, the 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 maid that was made for him, doesn't trust him. So Liam ends up putting him up to a little test where he's just gonna show a basic, not really a basic, but one of his special skills. So he more or less lies his way through it. He says this is the only special skill that you need to know. So he sets it up where there's the special skill that he showed him, more or less, he gives Liam a whole bunch of logs and he makes him place it all around the room in different areas. Now, the thing with that is, it was a trick he had set up. Um, the move, more or less, was supposed to go like this. He does like a quick draw and cuts through all the logs. Now, the trick was, again, I said this guy was more or less a fake. He set it up where all the logs were already cut. So after Liam placed it down, all he did was, unsheath his sword just slightly and then sheath it back. It more or less cut all the logs, but it was already cut. So when he did that, the trick just made it look like he did it so fast that you couldn't see. So Liam was amazed, and Amagi had given Liam a device to see if there was anything that was fraudulent about the technique. It did. The device didn't pick up on anything because the trick was so small, so easy that it kind of just bypassed it. So the device didn't go off. So Liam believed he was the real thing. So uh, this guy trains him up for roughly 40 years. Because again, like I said, they have a long lifespan. Now, over those 40 years, Liam ends up becoming incredibly strong, even though this guy, he's a fake. um, Everything that he's teaching him, he more or less just kept teaching him the basics, but a lot of the things that he trained him in, he trained him not only in swords, he trained him in other weapons as well. Again, he was just more or less training him the basics, and what he did was he was buying videos and using different things from those videos and more or less passing it off to Liam um, as training. So around 30 years old, Liam gets so strong that he's able to just barely pull off the same fake technique that he actually showed him back when he was a little kid. So before I get into the whole 30 thing, 10 years after he started being trained by Yasushi, that's the guy who that's training him, Yasushi. 10 years after he started training him, Liam was strong enough to cut a man in half. So what had happened was, a lot of the people that was working for Liam in the government and whatnot, a lot of them were corrupt. So Liam didn't like that. It more or less reminded him of his boss in his previous life. So he made an example of one of them. He cut him in half, clean. Now, by this time, Yasushi had already realized, like, okay, I'm not really teaching this kid much. How is he getting so strong? So Liam goes through everybody that's corrupt and that's working for him, and he kills all of them, gets rid of everybody. So now he more or less again he hires new people in their place to take over, people who follow him and do listen to him. So yeah, back to him being 30. Now he's more or less learned how to do somewhat. He still can't do it the way that he was shown, the fake the trick, but he's able to actually unsheath the sword super fast and cut through maybe like two logs at this point. So he's like, I'm still not as good as you. So at this point, Yasushi is panicking. He's like, he's already surpassed me. If we were to have a real fight, I'll die. And if he finds out I've been lying to him, he'll kill me. So what he does is he tells him, don't use that technique again for like another 10 years. We're gonna train a new way. We're gonna blindfold you. So again, Liam now he gets even stronger with the whole blindfold. So he blindfolds him and he gives him a heavier sword. So he realizes Liam is just getting stronger and stronger. It gets to a point where even though he has the blindfold on, he can still see everything that's going on with his other senses. So he more or less the Yasushi blindfolded him, and he realized that no matter where he moved, Liam was always still following him. So he was getting stronger. He actually walked around and did a whole bunch of things while blindfolded. So again, he starts panicking even more. So he's like, I gotta do something else now. I gotta take this serious. I gotta find a way to get out of here. So all this time, like I said, Amagi doesn't trust him. She realizes that he's a fraud. Brian also realizes that he's a fraud. Brian being the butler, like I said, he's a fraud, and more or less, he tells Liam, "We're gonna try something new." So, one of the things that, as a lord, that they have these mechas that they pilot. So he got a one of the Liam has a very old model stored away that belonged to his great grandfather. Now, in his great grandfather's time, the Banfield house was actually really run properly, and Brian was what has been with his family since his great grandfather. Now, Yasushi sends for Amagi, and he more or less tells her we need to get this this suit ready for him, the armor that ready for him is called the Avid, because we're gonna use that to train. Now, what he was really doing is an older model, so it doesn't have a lot of the features that the newer ones have. The newer um, robots are a lot easier to control and whatnot. So he figured he'd hinder him further by giving him an old armor that's more or less obsolete. There's newer versions. Amagi was against it, but she was given orders by Liam himself to follow whatever Yasushi says, because he's helping him out. And he has great respect for him. He sees him as this great master of the sword. Yeah. So eventually, Amagi gives in. She's like, well, if she doesn't see any point not to go along with it, that even though he's a fraud, he has been showing results with Master. Master has become, very strong. So she ends up getting it fixed up. And when it comes back, she sends it out to the seventh factory of the Empire. There's so many different factories. It goes to the seventh one because they're the ones who made that armor. So they'll be able to fix it up. So they fix it up. They give it a new coat of paint, whatever. It's back. It's fixed. But when it comes back, it's brought back by this character called Neas. She's more or less in charge of the seventh factory. Um, I mean, well, she's not in charge at this point, but she does get appointed to that later on. So she comes and she brings it back. The armor, more or less, it's very hard to use. So just standing up and walking with it, it's difficult. So Yasushi is seeing this time, as a time to start saving up and trying to flee. So eventually Liam does get control of it and learns how to use it, and all of this is making him stronger. So by then, Yasushi is like, okay, I gotta leave now. That's it. I can't, teach you anything else. You've more or less learned everything I have to teach you. All this time, he's afraid of him because now he's really learned how to do the technique by this point. Um, More or less, I forgot to mention that what the technique consists of is actual learning how to use the sword and whatnot, and magic. So That was another thing that Yasushi ended up making him learn was magic. So he ends up really learning how to do the technique, and he shows Yasushi. So Yasushi is at this point, he's like, I have nothing else to show you, and I must go now. So he's trying to run away. So Liam decides he wants him to stay because he feels like he's not on his level yet. He still has much to learn from Yasushi, but Yasushi more or less claims that he still has his own journey and he's still learning the sword and he has nothing else to teach him. So he runs away. He leaves Liam, and Liam at this point Liam has become a monster in terms of his strength. He's really strong. So we cut back again to the guide, and the guide's like, "Okay, let's check on Liam, see how he's doing." When he sees Liam and he realizes that everything's going great for him, it starts, affecting him in a bad way. Whereas he was, you know, once going to try and bring him up and then knock him down, everything's going great for Liam. So it's physically harming him that he's receiving praises from Liam. Liam's like, all of this is because of the guide. The guide set me up in this new life, and everything's going well for me, and I have nothing but praises for the guy. So he's hearing all of this, and it's really affecting him. He's like, oh my, I can't do this. So he sets up now another thing. He decides he's gonna call pirates to go, more or less knock down everything that he's built up. So, like I said, his territory, everything is going great. He's been able to start paying back the debt that his family owed. His people originally they saw it as just a little child taking over, and it's not going to be any different. But over the years, it's been like 40 years now. Um, Everything's been going great. The economy is just booming. Everything's being built back up. Jobs and everything. The society itself was coming up. Liam was doing a really good job of bringing the territory from rock bottom all the way up. So the guide more or less sends the pirates, um, go as go as pirates. They're notoriously known. Um, they- they're really bad. They destroyed so many planets. They they've done a lot of bad things, more or less. Now, like the pirates, Goaz, he has this one treasure that can more or less turn any inorganic material into stuff like mithril and gold and whatever. So that's one of the reasons why he became such a big and notorious pirate. That one treasure that he has. So another thing I forgot to mention was, Liam has his thing for gold. Again, Liam, the way Liam thinks is in terms of his old world. So everything that he thinks he's doing that's evil and whatnot, compared to the nobles of that world, where they're very extravagant and things that he done, if he had just followed course and been a regular noble, he probably would have hit his goal of being an evil lord. But because he's been going above and beyond and fixing up everything and doing whatnot, everybody's praising him. His people love him. His military has been going up. Like I said, he downsized the military, but what he did was he downsized it to train everybody and get everything up. So his territory went from the bottom of the bottom, all and it's been raising, and it just keeps raising out throughout the entirety of the novel. Just keeps going up. Everything's getting better and better. Um, so yeah. So now the pirates is coming towards his planet to destroy everything. So again, it's been like 40 years, and now they pick up on the pirates as they're coming. So he sets up with his army, which is only about, I believe, 3,000 at this point, against the pirates who have like 30,000, a whole fleet. So they end up, going to meet the pirates head on in space. Um, the people working under Leon in the army, what they originally had thought to do was they had already sent a distress call to the Empire to help them out because of they didn't feel like they could win. There's such a small fleet versus um, this whole pirate of 30,000 ships. So at this time, the guide goes to Liam and he explains to him, you know, I'm sorry about this position that you're in right now. I'm more or less sending the pirates towards you as a gift to make up for, you know, um, even though I reincarnated you into this world, it was as a noble who has, you had to do everything for build up this territory. So, as to make up for my mistake, I'm sending you these pirates that you can definitely handle by yourself. And there's a great treasure that the leader has. And, that's my present to you. So again, Liam thinks, yeah, okay, this is going to be easy then. This is more or less this battle is being handed to me. So now we get back to you know back in the prologue, the battle that was going on, his first actual real battle. So Liam finds out about what his army was trying to do, and he's like, he doesn't want to go through the battle like that because if number one is no guarantee that a fleet that big, nobody will break off from the fleet and attack his people, his territory, which Liam goes on to explain. He doesn't care about any of that, but he doesn't want anyone else to destroy what he built up. Only he can do that. So, and there's no guarantee that by waiting it out and stalling with this battle, that the reinforcements that was called on, that they'll get there in time. So Liam takes things into his own hands, and he goes to the front lines of the battle and starts charging the pirates more or less. Now his people, again, Liam's trying to be an evil lord, but his people are seeing him in such a great light because no other noble would do something like that. If nobles did come to the battlefield, it would always be in the back, protected by everybody, so that if anything bad happens, they could run away. But Liam here he is going to the front lines, fighting off these pirates by himself, even though the situation seems helpless. So his army and everybody's all like, oh, wow, he's such a great guy. He's like the best noble I could have ever come to work under. They're more or less building him up. Like, okay, he's such a great guy. Now he's already failing at what he's trying to be because now all his people love him. There's nobody that hates him, and he's done so much for everybody. And now his army, they're rallied. Everything is going great. They've never worked under somebody like this. So um, he goes out. He starts destroying the pirates easily. At this point, Yasushi has made him so strong that it's ridiculous how somebody that untalented was able to make him that strong. So all that's going on. He boards the main ship of the pirate fleet. He stands on it with his I'll call it armors like the other novel. He stands on it with his armor, the Gundam thing, and he starts destroying the main cannons and all the ships around it. So when he pushed through from the pirates, their 30,000 fleet, he ends up making a path for his fleet of 3,000 ships to just more or less go through all the way to the main part where the pirates are. So now he boards the ship that Goaz is on, and he starts killing the pirates easily. Like he has that skill, the flash, and he's able to just cut them up, and he's doing everything so quick that nobody in his army can see what he's doing. He's so strong. So he at this time the guide now sees what's going on. He's checking up on him again, and he's like, "This isn't how this was supposed to go." And Liam is still praising me. He's happy for everything that's going on. So it's making me weak and it's pissing me off. So Liam has been killing the pirates the leader of the pirates, Goaz, at this point he's afraid. He's hiding for his life, and the guide ends up. He's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I've been doing things indirectly, but I got to actually do this directly now. It's not the way I'd like to do things, but I have to do it this way because Liam is too strong. So he ends up powering up the leader of the pirates, Goaz. Um, he gives him this skin that more or less nothing can pierce. So Goaz now feels like he's so powerful, and he can do whatever he wants. So he goes on a rampage, and he starts beating some of the people, killing them and whatnot from the army that's under Liam. Now, again, the dog that been following the guide, um, it interferes again. It more or less leads Liam through the ship because Liam sees the dog in the corner of his eye. And he's reminded of what he said all those years back about the dog being the guide, but he's like, it's kind of late for that now, and I wouldn't want my dog to see me the way I am now, thinking that he's such an evil lord. But again, he's not really becoming an evil lord. He's doing everything right. So the dog leads him through the ship, and he ends up finding a secret door which holds a stash of treasure and whatnot that Goaz had. He finds the box, the alchemic box that Goaz had that can transmute materials into whatever he wants it to, like gold and whatnot. And he also finds this one sword that he took a liking to. So at this time, like I said, Goaz was going on a rampage with another group that entered the ship. Also, that group, still belonged to Liam, but like they broke off into different groups and was clearing out the pirates. So one of the people that went with Liam in his group reported that the leader Goaz is killing everybody in another group. So they all go take care of Goaz. So the pirate Goaz, he's killing everybody, and then Liam comes in and he ends up cutting him with his regular sword. Now, again, Yasushi trained him really well because he's able to cut through him with his sword. Now, the sword breaks; it's really, really brittle, but he's the only one who's able to actually damage, Goaz, being that he's been powered up by the guide. And um, he more or less he makes easy work of Goaz. He uses the sword that he found that Dog led him to, and he easily chops him up easily. Chops off his arms, chopped off one of his legs, and now here Boaz goes again, and he starts begging for his life. Um, so Liam, one of the reasons why he wanted to do this before any help showed up was because of the bounty on the pirates. So he more or less he dispatches the pirate easily, but he was gonna let him live. Now, at this point, his people more or less didn't want to let him live. The army guys, because of what they did, what he did, more or less he killed some of the men that was in the army. So they wanted to get rid of him. So Liam is against it at first because he thought that he was worth more alive than dead. But then when they brought it up and they showed him the wanted poster, it didn't matter. He could die. So Liam just chops off his head real quick, just to appease his army. Number one, and number two, because he didn't care. This guy was just father, more or less. So they take care of the pirates, and as they're exploring the ship, um, they more or less come into contact with another crewmate of the pirates, who was known as the Breeder. More or less, like I said, the pirates were doing some really messed up things, and one of the things that they did was, from the different planets that they was conquering and taking over and destroying, they would more or less take people from the planets, and the captain Goaz, he was really twisted. He would disconfigure and mess up people from these other planets. One of them that was there was um, a princess of another kingdom, Christiana. At this point, she's really messed up, but she's like the only one that kind of kept her sanity through everything that happened to her. But she's just more or less a blob of flesh. That's all that's left of her after everything that she's gone through. But she more or less she was holding out in hopes of some somebody defeating Goaz and whatnot. So she's a blob of flesh, and there's a whole bunch of others with her. The people that they captured, disconfigured and everything. So she actually if what happened to Goaz and the breather. So he tells her that he more or less killed them both. He killed Goaz and he killed the breather just before they got to this room, because as they got to the room where they had all the people that they disconfigured and whatnot, when the soldiers went in and they saw everything, the ones that went in, they ran right back out and they started throwing up and everything because of how horrid everything what had happened and what had took place in there. The breeder, described it as his lab, and when he fully described everything that went on to Liam, because his officers told him not to go in that room. When he fully described it to Liam just shot him in the head. So he was like, Liam didn't like it because he felt like the people that was there, that what had happened to them, he felt a connection to them because he felt like they was him in his previous life. They everything just went bad for them. So um, when he goes into the room, he meets Christiana. He explains to her, he killed the breeder, he killed the captain of the pirates. So she more or less thanks him, and she asks him to just, set them, if he could save them more or less. What she meant by saving was more or less killing everybody and setting them free, but he decides, okay, I'll save you. He said he's in a good mood, so he ends up taking everybody um, that, was disconfigured, and he takes them away. So at this point, they wasn't satisfied with that because they wanted to be killed. So he took them away, and they thought, they was going into another bad situation. But what had happened was, um, Liam built a hospital in his territory. So he ends up getting elixirs and whatnot to restore them back to what they were before, prior to being messed up. So he sets off with that, but before that happens, he goes to he goes to the Empire for a year. Now, while at the Empire, when he first arrives, his parents and his grandparents come to him for money, more or less. They've been living extravagant lives again in the Empire, and they owe debts again. So after they abandoned him when he was a baby, they're coming back to him for more money. So he more or less, he's like, he has no use for them. He kicks them out the room, and Amagi advises him, it's probably better to give them some money so that nothing later on down the line bad happens, because they don't want anything. She didn't want his parents to do anything to him, more or less. So again, now the guide comes in again. The guide's pissed off because everything that's been going down so far, he's been trying to knock Liam down, and it's not going well. So now he decides to take use of his family. Um, he sets it up where he um, gets into their heads, and he more or less he's gonna have them more or less appeal to him, because he came to the Empire first of all to more or less earn a medal. He like I said, he's been doing so great in his territory. He built up the Banfield House from rock bottom. It's great now. He's paying back all his debts. He subjugated pirates on his own. Um, Everything's going great for him. He's doing really good, and everybody sees him in this great light. whereas he thinks he's being selfish and whatnot with certain decisions that he's making. But in truth, like I said before, if he had just been a regular noble in that world, then yeah, he would have hit his goal real easily. But because he's going above and beyond and trying to build up his territory so that he can take from them back and doing all of this stuff, everybody sees him in such a great light. He's like the best noble that they've ever seen. So the the guy gets into his family's head more or less. He has the grandparents come up with the idea of appealing for them to take him out from being leader of the Banfield House and appointing, making them come back in power. And the parents more or less figured, all right, because he don't want to give us money, he's become a failure. So we're gonna have to make another heir. So they're gonna just have another kid to replace him, and they're gonna get assassins to come kill him. So when um when they got to the Empire, it was him and Amagi. Brian didn't go with them because he had to take care of other things at the house. So um, when the parents saw Amagi, they said that it's time that he got rid of her because um, the thing with robots and AI in this world is that in the past um, they more or less destroyed everything. So they don't view AI and stuff like that in good light. So as a noble, he shouldn't have one, but they gave him one because because of how they were. They were pretty useless parents. So his mother just gifted him that, just more or less to take the place of them in the time that they just abandoned him. So when the guide went into them and they was scheming up all of this, Amagi had left his side when he met with the parents because of what they said. So as she was walking around and everything, she ended up overhearing the conversation of what the parents and the grandparents was going to do. So she stepped in and she more or less she took care of everything so that nothing would happen to Liam. So he earned his medal, and for a year he ends up staying in the Empire, just partying, enjoying himself, whatever. So Amagi explains to him that it's probably time that he does get rid of her because like the parents said, it's not a good look for him to have an AI with him because nobles look down on that. But he didn't like that idea. More or less, he felt like Amagi was abandoning him just like his parents, and he didn't want that. Just like his wife in his previous life, all of that. So it really hit him, and he ordered her, you have to stay by my side. So she ended up staying. And when the parents went to put up the appeal against him, it was completely denied. Amagi had taken care of things behind the scenes. She let them know what the parents were scheming already. And even if um, she didn't, I don't think that they would have listened to the parents because, again, going back based on what all that he's accomplished, the Empire sees him in really good light. He's been paying back everything that they started. He didn't accept his reward for beating the pirates. He's doing really good. And if they was to put the parents back in power, and everything would go to crap again. So they decided against it. They let them know it's not happening. So he goes back home, and now he's 50. you know, another year or so. Well, yeah, another year or so passed. He's now 50. He's of age now. He's an adult. He has his ceremony, and you know, Christiana, the Blob, she's back. Everything's fixed. She woke up, you know, in the hospital like a little bit, like a year before he came. Not a year, like yeah, maybe about a year before he came. Well, I said he spent a year, so sometime during that time when he was at the Empire. She woke up, she was back to human form, and she more or less serves him now as his knight, his princess knight. So um, that's pretty much it. That's the end of the first novel. Again, like I said, this novel was pretty fun. Um, he's trying to be an evil lord, but he's really going against everything that he's trying to do. Again, like they said, he was a good person in his other life, and he just doesn't understand what it means to be an evil lord. And even then, by his standards, a lot of what he's trying to do, um, the nobles of that world are just really bad. You might as well just be a regular noble. So yeah, that was volume one. It was pretty interesting. I like it. Next video, I'm gonna do volume two of this series because um, right now there's only two books in this series. So I'll talk about volume two, and then right after volume two, I ended up finding my third volume for Dating Sim. So after I do a video on this, I'll come back to Dating Sim, and then I'll go through Dating Sim volumes three, four, and five. So yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed. Um, Again, if you want to talk about anything, you want to have a more in-depth conversation about this book, I'll go into more detail about what happened. If you want to talk about anime, manga, whatever, just like I said, join my Discord. I'll have it down in the description. Leave some comments, and I hope you enjoyed. So I'll see you next time with volume two, and that's it. See you later.